started. First of all, thanks for taking the time to get on the phone and on the internet and join us on this. And what we want to show today is something that, at least for now, internally is called StratumLink. But this is part of our strategy to really make it easier to get information into Stratum. And we've focused on a couple of things over the last few years, predominantly focused on easy out, as we've said internally, so getting data out of Stratum, and now we want to focus on getting data into Stratum. So just by way of introduction, I don't know that I know everyone that's listed here. I'm a vice president over here, responsible for both pre and post sales, working with customers both pre and post sales, as well as probably most importantly on our product strategy group. So very familiar with the product and some of our strategies there. Paul Dorsett is with me as well. Paul owns all of the customer success and implementation stuff that happens post sales. So he's also very involved with us on the strategy side, bringing his guys and his expertise into some of the things that we do to Stratum. So we may know some of you guys, we may not know all of you, so that's us. I thought what I would do is just talk briefly about a strategy here and what we're doing at Silvon, and how the idea of what we're calling StratumLink and the idea of getting data into Stratum fits in the big picture. And if you were to look at what we deliver as part of Stratum, we deliver a repository or a data hub that's made up of a series of applications that allow you to collect data from around the enterprise. And with that, we want to focus on your business initiatives and a single version of the truth that you can use as a reporting repository and an analytics repository. Around that, we want to add the ability for you to be able to get data out of Stratum, which is something that we've done and talked a lot about in the past, and we'll continue to work on and do different things there. But the idea that you can use Stratum, our web-based interface, Stratum Viewer, as most of you know it as, and be able to leverage that and take advantage of it. And then on the other side, you can get directly to our database. We have an open database, things like that. So that's just not the focus of today's presentation, but conceptually that's the getting data out of Stratum and being able to take advantage of that. What we want to talk about today is getting data into Stratum. And we did a session a few weeks ago on what we called user control data up at the top of the hub diagram here. And that was all about getting data into Stratum via an Excel spreadsheet, making that very simple and easy to do. That's a change that's expected to come out in the last quarter of this year and become available, so you can easily take a spreadsheet. An analyst at the user side can take that, import it into Stratum, and bring that in. And when I showed that, we went through kind of how that works, and you can see over here, I'll just give you a quick recap. In the admin utilities here, you can see you'd have a data import facility, and this again is for importing a budget, for example. So I can just go ahead and say, I have a spreadsheet that has a budget, I want to go ahead and import that. I can select something that might have my budgets in it, and just say okay. Stratum will map that out for you. You can adjust the map. You can do things, specify whether something's a dimension, a measure, or if you just want to ignore that data and not bring it into Stratum. So this is a very simple import mechanism that's designed for an analyst to be able to bring in a spreadsheet. And we talked about this, and you can actually find this out in the Resource Center on Silvon.com, the session we did on this, and you can take a look at that. What we want to talk about today is kind of the other end of that, and what we've typically called corporate controlled data, or data that you might have more complex data sources on and requires more than just a simple spreadsheet to import that. And we really think of StratumLink, and we're going to introduce StratumLink in the next few months, as a way for you to grab data from more complex data sources, whether it's your ERP, whether it's from the web, things like that. And if I was to describe StratumLink to you, it's a web-based ETL tool that allows you, it's simple to use and allows you to grab data from different sources, and we'll see that in a minute. And probably the most common thing that people would use it for is either SQL Server databases or DB2 databases that you have information stored in that you want to go and bring that data into Stratum. Along with that in StratumLink, for those of you that are familiar with our import process today, we've created a simplified API or semantic layer that allows you to more easily bring data in, whether you're using StratumLink or you want to continue to use whatever ETL you're using today. So for probably the majority of our customers, that would be SSIS or SQL Server, could also be RPG. So those are things that you can do to take advantage of the new simplified API as well. So again, the idea of StratumLink was to allow you to bring in more complex data sets than we talked about a few weeks ago with the UCD and Excel imports. And I thought with that, we would go ahead and just kind of go through taking a look at some of the parts of StratumLink and what it looks like. So with that, I'm going to jump over to here. I was just here showing you the demo. One of the things I did want to point out when you're here, if you're looking for some of the other insight classes, there's a couple of ways. The recordings, I mentioned the user control data recording I did. You can always go to the Resource Center here, and I just clicked on Resource Center, and if you scroll down, you'll find all the insights. For example, here's a couple of these here. If I went into, I think that it's down in miscellaneous preview of how users can add new data. So this is the one that describes importing an Excel spreadsheet with some of the new functionality coming out later this year that I was mentioning. So that's out there. You can also get there off of the Stratum homepage if you were just real quick. You can go to Archive Classes here and you'll get to that same web page and see the same stuff. So with that said, what I wanted to do today was to take you into StratumLink and just give you a really quick tour of the idea behind StratumLink and how it works. So with that, you'll see here I've simply gone into a web page, and so this is web-based. There's no need for a user or an analyst or an IT guy or person to be able to get on the server and use this to move data around. So that's one of the big pluses. You can do this over the web. You can do it without having to have direct access onto the server to move data around. With that said, you also can set up in here what we call different applications. Each application, you can set up authority so that people only have access to certain applications if you only want them to be able to run or move certain imports. Because an interesting thing that this brings up that's a bit different than getting data into Stratum today is that you would have the option now of not only creating an import process that would grab data from wherever. I think my example is going to show grabbing some open purchase orders. But you would wherever you're grabbing data from, you would be able to not only set that up and schedule it to run, say on a nightly basis, or if you want it to run hourly, whatever it may be in a trickle load situation, you can do that, but also you could run it on demand. So this is going to bring up that option if you were, say, importing data from a forecast tool that you have, or budgeting process where the data winds up in a table somewhere. You could actually say, hey, we know we made changes, I want to click the button to import that data. So you now have an on-demand option as well to get data into Stratum. But those applications, I'm going to go and, amazingly enough, click on the one that says Demo. And this brings up a series of things. And what I'm going to talk about today are some of the two key aspects of StratumLink in terms of the kinds of things you'd want to define and the kinds of things that you need to make those definitions work. So what we have is scenarios, and you can have different scenarios here. You'll see I have a load purchase orders right here, and I really have two steps to that. These are each parts of the scenario, different functions in the scenario. The first function allows me to map data from my source. So if I was to click on that, that's going to show me a bunch of stuff down here coming from my open PO detail as well as my PO header. So I'll talk just a little bit about data sources now. So you have to describe a data source and say, hey, where do I want the data to come from? And then ultimately, where do I want the data to go to? And if I was to look at the data sources I have defined here, you'll see I have one is my from source where I'm going to pull data out of this database, and then I'm going to push it up into my Stratum environment. So I really, for any one of these scenarios, you're probably going to have it, not probably, you will have at least two data sources. One being your source, which might be your ERP database, it might be another custom database that you have, and that database could be in Access, it could be in Excel, or, I'm sorry, in MySQL, it could be in SQL Server or something like that. And then you're going to have another source, which is the target, and that's simply, in this case, your Stratum database, and it's your Stratum server database. And for those of you that are familiar with Stratum server and its construction, you would know that that could exist both in SQL Server or in DB2 on the IBM-I, and you could have either one of those as a target. Other kinds of sources you can have, if I was just to kind of drop down here, you'll see there's a bunch of sources here. This is for Salesforce, so if you have data in Salesforce, we have a data source for that. You can use SQL, you can use MySQL, you can use DB2. There's a whole bunch of different data sources where you can grab data from here. If you've got a specific database or application that might be a place to get data from Stratum, we'd be very interested in hearing about it. And we could potentially build a data source specifically for that if it's something that we could distribute and make available to other people as well. So you have to have sources. That's probably the simple, any of these styles of products that you've used or looked at in the past, they'd be asking you where do your data come from, and you have to set that up. The other part of that is once you've set that up and your target is down here at the bottom, and this is basically the idea that you want to map data from your data over here on the left, and you can see I've actually got data from the header and the detail. So what that would imply is that I've been able to join those two tables together. And for those of you that are familiar with this, this is the process of taking multiple different tables or files that you have that hold data and joining them together based on a particular piece of information. In this case, you can see down here, I've created a join. If I open that up, you'll see I'm actually joining it on the order number. So I have the order header, which has the vendor information in it, when the order was placed, that kind of thing. And then I have the detail file, which actually has the individual items that I've ordered, the price associated with that, and that kind of thing. So you can see I've joined that together so that I can see it up here. Now, for those of you that are familiar with this, I can have different kinds of joins. I can have an inner and outer, or left, right, full, that kind of stuff. So different joins that are available. Here I've joined this on a single particular column, on this case the order number. You can have multiple columns defined here. You could join on many things if you needed. If you had different like receiving records here, you might join on the order, and the order line, things like that. So you can join on multiple things. Additionally, when I'm talking about my source and bringing data into and moving data to Stratum, I could actually add conditional things here. So I could say, hey, I want to hear from my OpenPO header. I might say I want to select the column, and I might say that the warehouse, I only want data coming into from, I don't know, my Chicago location. So I could say, quote, I don't know, CHI is what we use in our data. So I could add that as a condition. So I can add conditional stuff, so I only pick off certain records. This might be an order type. It might be, as I used here, a location. Might be something like that you want to bring in and show and grab just that data to bring into Stratum. So a lot of flexibility there in terms of ands and ors and all that kind of stuff for doing Boolean logic there. And then, of course, the last part of this is you'll probably want to bring, not probably, the whole point is to be able to bring information in to and map it over to Stratum. So here I can see I've said I want to bring it into my category OP. This is a Stratum thing, and if they're called categories, allows me to say, hey, I want a specific category, and that will drive the definition of what you see over here on the right in terms of the dimensional information. So these are the dimensions in Stratum that you want to bring in. That could be your items, your vendors, things like that. And then also, as I scroll down the list here, you'll see I get into the different kinds of measures. So here I have my open PO units, open amounts. These are all different things that are available for you to load up in Stratum and take advantage of. So you have a bunch of those. So that shows up, and I want to map data from the stuff on the left, my source, over to the target. And if that's pretty straightforward to do. If I was to scroll up in the target here, I'll go back to my dimensions, and let's just say over here I have some data here, and I could bring in, let's see, what do I have here? I can match up. Here I've got the product group over here, so I can take the product group and I can drag it and just drop it on the product group over here, and that will in fact bring that data in, and now it'll know to map the product group from the PO detail over to the product group in the target. Now this is an interesting thing because you'll note that when I had this set up originally, I didn't bring the product group over from my source. And the reason for that is one of the cool things that Stratum will do for you on this is if you bring in, say, the product information and you have what we call previous levels or virtual dimensions defined around your product where it automatically knows the group and the category or whatever you call them in your implementation, you don't have to map all that stuff over. StratumLink will automatically go out and bring in all your previous level information about your customers, your products, whatever you have defined in Stratum, it'll bring that over for you automatically. It updates also, Paul, it does the day of the week and some stuff like that automatically as well. So it will also take advantage of the Stratum calendar. So if you bring over a transaction date, we know to look and see, hey, do you want us to put that in a fiscal, map that up to your fiscal stuff, to a regular calendar, both, roll it up into weeks, months, years, and all that stuff. So it'll do that for you automatically as well. And you can bring over lots of different kinds of data. In fact, I have another example that I wanted to show that just kind of shows you can do a lot of different kinds of calculations and substringing and things like that as you bring data over, and that would be the T part of it being an ETL tool where you can do the transformations. So you can actually go ahead and do some different transformations in here as well. So I think it was in here where I had a couple of things just to show you what some of the transformations might look like. Is this where I had that? Let's see. What I had. Yeah, down here you can see, so this is on the measure side. I've actually cast this, I wanted to, as a different type, so I've changed the typing there. Over here, I've done a calculation. These, of course, can get as complex as you want. I think I have a little more. Yeah, here's one that does the quantity times selling price and stuff like that. So you can change up and transform the data as it moves from your source over to your target and do different things around that. So those are some transformations. I think I had another transformation out here that I wanted to show as well, which was really around the idea of substringing out, I think it was the date, to be honest, now that I remember. If I go back to my scenario and loading up some open purchase orders here, if I go down here, you'll see, here you can see I'm substringing stuff out of the different fields in my source over here on the left to get certain pieces. And in the top here, I'm pulling out just the year. So I've got a 4-digit date in the year, and I'm pulling out 4 digits from the left. Over here, I'm pulling out, just the specific date, or I'm sorry, the period number, so the month. So I'm pulling that over. So you can do different things like that as you move data through your source, and it's simple scripting to do that stuff. So that's a little bit about StratumLink and the mapping of data. So I talked about data sources. You need to find a source and a target. Your source can be many different things. Then you can map your data. It's pretty straightforward. To be able to do mapping, you can just drag and drop those things that come over as is, your customer number, your product numbers, things like that. If there's data you have, for example, maybe you have a standard cost that you want to get a total extended cost for to import into Stratum. You take your units and multiply it by the cost, things like that. You can do that. And then the last thing you need to do is get it into Stratum. So a couple of things there that you would want to be able to do. And that's, first is we supply a simple script that runs behind the scenes all the different things that need to happen to get data into Stratum, and there's no real need for you to be able to know any of that stuff or deal with it. All you really need to know is, do you want to update the cube, yes or no? What category are you working in? So as I mentioned, this is open purchase orders. And then you need to tell us the load type. And we talk about load types. You'll see in the doc that we have that you can run a clear, you can run a append, so you can add data, you can clear data, you can totally refresh the category as well. So some different types of loads that you can run. And then ultimately, you would want to be able to schedule that stuff. And you can see here, we've got some scheduling stuff, so I can schedule to run these things whenever I want. And when I edit that, you'll see I can pick the days of the week. I can, probably for most people, it's either daily or weekly. If it's hourly, I can decide to run it every number of hours. If I want to do it daily, every X number of days, whatever it may be. So you can set up a schedule to run those and then submit those. For those of you that might want to use StratumLink in conjunction with loads that you already have running for Stratum, you do have the option of running these particular scenarios via command line, which you could add to your existing schedules. So that's a little more technical. You'd have to get on into your scheduler to be able to add that, but that is a feature of StratumLink as well. So you can integrate StratumLink imports with your existing imports. That's something that we accounted for as well. So this was, merely to give you guys an overview of some of the stuff in StratumLink and get you familiar maybe with some of the things we're doing there. I thought what I would do is go ahead and open up the phones in the last few minutes we have and see if anybody has any questions or comments, and then we'll call it a day for today's class.
Unmuted.
So any questions, thoughts, comments? Okay. As my standard response to this is, I'm taking silence as a no. So that was what we wanted to show you guys today and just give you a flavor for that. Just to kind of reiterate a couple things, we are in beta testing with StratumLink today, and it would expect for this to be available in the next 30 to 60 days is the current timeline, depending on what we find out in the field. That includes both StratumLink and the API for simplified API and semantic layer for getting data into Stratum. If you have questions or you want to talk further about StratumLink or see a little bit more detail, certainly don't hesitate to contact us. I'm Frank Bunker. Paul Dorsett was here with me as well. Or contact your sales rep. Any way you want to get a hold of us, and we'd be happy to spend time talking about not only how StratumLink works, what some of the options may be, but how it might fit into your situation with Stratum and make life a little easier for you to get information into Stratum. So with that, I'm going to call it a day. Again, thanks for joining us. Appreciate everybody taking the time and listening in, and we will look forward to talking to some of you in the future.